Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. We're in a phase now where I'm kind of reintroducing you or introducing you to music and to the simpler instruments, recorders, tonettes, song flutes, and different woodwinds instruments because I'm a specialist on woodwinds. But I want to do this every so often. I want to kind of reintroduce you because for some people maybe they haven't watched the show before and they need to have a refresher. Some people just need to have a refresher to learn more about music. It's not a performance show. It's learning music. And I go into all kinds of things about music. Now, what I wanted to start with today is this wooden recorder. This recorder is a German recorder. It plays well. And I remember on the last segment, I told you about the double holes on the bottom. Now, let me just go over that again. The double holes on the bottom of the recorder. On the D, which is right here, there are two holes. See if I can see that all right. And then the C has also two holes kind of on the side. And I can see them clearly from here. So when you have your fingers on the recorder, this is B, A, G, F, E, and then here will be two holes right here that I'm going to put my hands on, and then two holes on the bottom. I can see it in the monitor. You have to, most of these are adjustable, so you can twist the foot joint in different ways. Well, not all of them have those two holes in the bottom. This is why I brought this one in. This is a German recorder. The foot joint and the body are together as one unit instead of separate. And in the bottom, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or not because of the dark color of the instrument, but there's only one hole for that D and one hole for that C. Now, does it make a difference? It really doesn't. You can play just as much on this recorder that doesn't have quite as many tone holes as you can on the other recorders that have an extra two tone holes. It doesn't really matter. You can play just as well on it. This is an older recorder, and it's made out of wood. It's German. It plays very well. It does not have a little B on top of the tone hole or the thumb hole in the back, indicating that it is a German recorder, and so its fingering is a little simpler than that has a B on the top, which stands for Baroque. Without it, it's German. So here we go, just to review a little of what I did last time. B, A, G, F, E, D, and then the lowest one will give you a C. Now, on a recorder with the tone holes, the extra tone holes, it's about the same thing, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. The one difference is, and I don't know as you're going to be able to see it, there's a little B on top of the thumb hole in the back. As a matter of fact, most of the instruments are like that. There's a little tiny B. It's hardly noticeable. I don't even think it may be worth trying to find it. But here it is, and I've got my finger right on top of that. That, in the tone hole in the back, indicates that this is a Baroque. The fingering pattern of the Baroque is a little different than the fingering pattern of the German instruments. However, it really doesn't make any difference as to how they play. But let's say this is the alto. I love the altos. They're beautiful instruments. This would be the B flat. You put this down. Sometimes I put the right hand down as well. When you get to the F on a Baroque, you skip this and you put another finger down. So this F is fingered like this, whereas on an instrument that doesn't have those two, that's not a Baroque, that's German, you finger the F just by putting one finger down. Baroque, an extra finger. So there are two or three different fingering changes. The advantage of my bringing in the altos is I usually don't have them here, but they are beautiful instruments. They have a wonderful tone. I had somebody tell me it was their favorite instrument. It was when I was playing an alto because of the tone. It's a deeper tone, a little harder to play because of the finger stretches, but they play beautifully. And this is Yamaha And this one, I got to check on this one and see what this one, this is also a Yamaha, play exactly alike, and they sound exactly alike. So when I went through the divisions of the different parts of the instrument, I mentioned, and to go right to this chart, the head joint up here, and then I talked about the blocks. I'm going to just put it over a page or two and see what I've got here. Well, I'm going to skip 2 or 3 pages, I guess. But what I wanted to show you, what I had in mind to show you, was the different parts. This part from here to here is going to be the head joint. Now, to show you how much bigger this is than the other descants, it takes my whole hand, and I can't even reach to the length of the head joint. This is the head joint. This is the body of the instrument from here down to here, and from here to here is the foot joint. And some instruments, as the German one I just showed you, the body and the foot joint are made into one part rather than 2. It doesn't make any difference in terms of how they play, but I wanted to show you that. And especially it's easier to see when I do it on this Yamaha right here, because the tone holes are all kind of lighter colored because the instrument is lighter colored. And in the back you have that B for Baroque, and then you hold it the same way as you would a regular descant. Now when I say descant, I mean the soprano recorders, which are also called descants. And this is the head joint, and this is the body, and this is the foot joint. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important for cleaning purposes. If you're going to clean the instrument, and you should wipe it out each time you play it, it's important. Also, the instruments being pulled apart, they're easier to work with. You can clean them better, and some of them you can't do that because they're not made that way, but most of them are. The more expensive instruments come out in 3 parts, and they also have the double holes. The lack of the double holes does not prevent you from playing the notes that you need to play. The purpose of that double hole on the D and the double hole on the C is to help you with the flats and the sharps that you're going to play, and it is a help. But it doesn't mean you can't play them if those extra holes aren't there. I think the more modern instruments have them. The older instruments sometimes do not, but it doesn't make a bit of difference in terms of how you play them. They play the same, except for a fingering or 2 here or there, and you can get all of the notes that you normally would get. Now, a descant or a soprano, which is one of these, this is a soprano, this is a soprano, it's an LMI, it's a student model, but it plays very well, and you know, it's not so clearly demarked as to where the joints are, but it plays very well as a student model, and it has a thumb hole in the back. So you need to get familiar with the different ones, because you probably, if you're playing recorder, you would probably play the different ones. But with the descants, you can see it's easier to handle it because the finger stretches out that bad. So it's B, A, G, F. In this case, this is a Baroque, so this would be the F, and then E, D, C. Now, one thing that's fascinating is I introduce you to the woodwinds. If you were to play a scale on this instrument, the C major scale, you start with your C right here. The C is the second hole down. I'm going to go over the fingerings with you and as time goes by, but if you can remember C right here, and then you flip and lift that finger up and put your first finger down, the index finger down, so you're going C, B, and then even though the B is lower than the C, that's the way that you finger it. And then you just start adding fingers, A, G, F, E, D, and C. when I put the F down, I should also put that down because it's a Baroque. If it was not a Baroque, then you just use that one finger for the F. And they all finger that way. Now, if you're to compare them with other instruments, which is what I want to do today, it's very interesting that the fingering patterns for most of these instruments is pretty much alike. So I want to go over some of the charts that I have here. I started doing them last time and I didn't quite finish. This is a picture of the recorders, and it was all sketched out. I have most of them. The smallest one is a Sopranino. I brought that in last time. I'll be bringing it in again. And this is going to be the soprano, which is going to be the descant, which is what I've showed you, the little white one that I showed you. And this is going to be the alto, which you can see is bigger. Then you have the tenor. I have two tenors, and they are fairly large. And then you have the basses. I have a folded bass, but the great basses have what's called a bocal. The mouthpiece extends down with a tube, and you blow in there. You don't blow into the top of it. It's basically way too tall to be able to do that. Most people play them standing up. The great basses cost thousands of dollars. I have them all except for the great basses. Now the folded bass, which I didn't bring in today, is fairly large, and I just did a sketch of that. And here's another sketch of it, and I put in some keys. You have two keys, actually 4 keys, on the bass, on the folded bass. If that was standing up straight, it did not have that curve, which is also called a neck piece, then it would be a lot taller. It's almost 3 feet, it's almost a full 3 feet as it is. And the great basses, of course, are larger than that. So I'm flipping through some pages just to show you, since I can't bring them all in at the same time. I mentioned the tenor. Now here's a picture of me, but I'm holding the tenor, and that's, you can see pretty much how large it is. It really is quite large. We were doing a concert, and we took our instruments, and we each had at least one of our instruments, and they photographed us with a picture of, I believe it's Beethoven. But anyway, I brought it in because I wanted you to see the size of the tenor. I'm thinking next time I'm coming in, I'm going to try to bring in the bass and the tenor. That would be a good thing for you to see, but I can't carry everything in at once. Here's an actual photo of a bass, and you can see the bocal is right here. It's quite large, and this is a perfect in terms of the sizes between them. This is an alto, and you've seen the alto. I brought that in. And it is fairly large. So if you can see, the alto is here. See how much bigger that bass is going to be. And the vocal's here. And then you have that little knob on the end. That's because you're going to put it on the floor to play it. You're not going to hold it in your lap. It's way too big for that. I love the basses. They have a beautiful tone. Now, so to go over the recorders, and I won't go over all of them, the soprano and the alto, the tenor, and the bass, and the great basses, and the smallest one is the sopranino, which I had in last week. The sopranino is about 9 inches long, 9 to 9.5 inches long. The soprano, excuse me, is about 1 foot long. And so it just gets larger and larger. The alto is, I didn't measure it, but see a comparison here between the melody or soprano and the alto. There's quite a big difference. And then, of course, if you had the sopranino, it would be even smaller than that. It does get to be a challenge to bring instruments in because I have so many of them. So I want to just show you a few instrument pictures because I want to show you the similarities, especially in terms of fingerings of these different instruments that are woodwinds. With woodwinds, you see, you're blowing into the instrument. You either have a mouthpiece, it could be a Fipple mouthpiece, which is what the recorders have, or it could be a reeded instrument like a clarinet or a saxophone. It could be a double reeded instrument like for an oboe or a bassoon, and the fingering patterns are very very, very similar. Now, this is a flute. It has what's known as a lip plate right around here, and it raises the mouthpiece a little bit. And here you have the head joint right here, the body right here, and the foot joint right here, just like you would have on a recorder. On the underside is a mechanism that you would use to get octaves, and also some of the notes. The octaves on a recorder is usually done with that little tone hole in the back. If you play a note, a regular note, and you pull your thumb down a little bit so that part of that is showing, not all of it, you don't pull it all the way, but just part of it, then you're going to bounce up a note to its octave, which is all right to do. It works on a lot of the notes. It doesn't work on all of them, but that's basically how you do it. Now, the octave that I'm getting when I'm playing the higher note, an octave is really 8 notes. And the last note is a repeat of the first note. And all you're doing is playing the same note, but the vibrations are half as large. And so, therefore, the tone is 1 octave higher. And so D is one of those notes where you don't do that. You have your low D right here, and to get the high D, you have this finger on, only this finger. So balancing is important. Some of the larger instruments have straps, and you put it around your neck like the saxophone straps. But these instruments, in fact, the bass does have one. But instruments like this, you kind of have to balance them in your mouth and have the fingers on and have the right hand on the back, so you're balancing it with your mouth and the right hand. When I play the C, the tone hole is down. If I want D, I have to take that thumb off completely. And when I do that, the only thing that's going to balance this instrument in place is going to be my mouth and the right hand, and having the right hand in a different position, not covering a hole, because you'd get a note, and you can't do that when you're playing a D, but it has to be in a certain position so that it will balance the instrument. So it is not too unusual that new students will be dropping instruments, because there's no strap to protect against it on an instrument that's the size. But other instruments, they do have straps for that. So for the octave, many times you just pull this down, pull the thumb down, and you'll get an octave up. Now, if it's a case of the D, I can force it by doing the same thing, but that's not the correct fingering. For the D, I would take everything off, including the thumb. Right now I've got the thumb down for balance, but if I had it in my mouth, I'd have to take the thumb off, look by no thumb, and this one finger, just the middle finger of the left hand on the second hole down, and my mouth, and just holding it by the right hand as much as I can without covering a tone hole, that gives me the high D. Well, what if I want to go to E? Then that fingering no longer applies, and I play the E like the low E, but I pull my thumb down for the octave. It's called half-holing. You pull it down halfway. So even though the recorder is fairly easy to play, it does have some challenges. I get questions oftentimes from people who say, what's the easiest instrument to play? And what can I learn? How can I learn an instrument the fastest? And I always say, it depends upon how well you want to play, because every instrument is going to have its challenges. And in this case, for the recorder, the real challenge is going to be to manage from C to D, and then back down with half holing for other octave notes. And then if you don't want the octave, you put the thumb covering it, and you get the low version. But if you want that C to D, here's your C, and then your E, there's your D right there. Now I can force it if I want to, because this is a good instrument. You can do a lot of things with a good instrument that maybe with a less expensive instrument, although this wasn't much. So, but you can force it. I can do the high D, but that's not the correct fingering. And you'll notice that the correct fingering is also a little more accurate in its pitch. So they're very interesting instruments. You can play these instruments in the key of C or D. It's in the key of C. Every instrument has its own key, and this is in the key of C. But you can play it in the key of D, in the key of F, in the key of G, and I have managed it for B flat. However, that's a little harder to do. The recorders can play almost anything that anybody else can play. I arrange classical music for recorders. I've done the Messiah on recorders. If it's in the right key that the instrument can handle, you can play a lot of things on a recorder. And the difference in the size would be that these are deeper, the altos are deeper, and so therefore their tone is a little deeper, but it has a beautiful tone. That's a little bit different, isn't it? But they're beautiful instruments, and I use them whenever I can. The thing is, as you get older, or if you have trouble with your hands, the finger stretches can be a bit unmanageable for some people. I don't have a real problem with this instrument, but if I were to play it for a long period of time, I would have some achy fingers. And I remember practicing it, and I was using an alto at the time, and I was practicing it, and there were a lot of hand position changes and stretches, and I actually took and knocked a finger off its joint. I heard the loudest crack you can't imagine, and all of a sudden, the finger had become dislodged from the joint. And the pain was like excruciating. But I held the hand with one hand and ease the joint back together. But for a while, I couldn't do finger stretches after that as it was healing. So you do have some challenges in terms of stretches, in terms of if you have small fingers, or if you're young, or if you're arthritic, that can come into play. So I'm going to close it here, but I'm going to continue next time showing you charts of different instruments and how the fingering patterns are pretty much alike. So we'll close it here. Please join me next time.